Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily. Today is Friday, May 3rd, 2024. On today's episode of the show, we're going to be talking about David Leitch's new movie, The Fall Guy, and then present some quick interviews with the director and the stars of the film. My name is Ben Pearson. I am an editor at slashfilm.com, and I'm joined on today's episode by Slash Film editor Brad Oman.
Hey, that's me.
All right, Brad. So I think Jacob Hall and Ryan Scott both saw this movie at South by Southwest, and they talked about it on this podcast previously. So I wanted to have you on to talk with me about it because we both saw the film earlier this week, and it's much more sort of top of mind for us. So before we get into spoiler stuff, what did you think about The Fall Guy?
I dug the hell out of this movie. I think that it is easily David Leitch's best movie. It manages to be a movie that has incredible action, a super charming romance with great chemistry between Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt, and a hilarious comedy without really dropping any of those threads and favoring one over the other. It's just a combination of all three of those genres that mixes perfectly into each other. The stunts are great because David Leitch knows what he's doing there and has for a long time. Gosling and Blunt are just two people like working at the top of their game, and having them together is fantastic. On top of the supporting cast, which is also very good, including Aaron Taylor Johnson and Hannah Waddingham, and Winston Duke as well. So yeah, I really love this movie. I think it's a fantastic way to kick off blockbuster summer in lieu of not having any exciting Marvel movies around to do it, as has typically been the case for the past, I don't know, decade.
Yeah, for sure. So there's a moment during the climactic final battle of the 1996 blockbuster Independence Day, Brad, where Randy Quaid sacrifices himself by flying into one of the big alien spacecrafts and blowing it up. And Bill Pullman, who is playing the president of the United States, who is leading the air attack in a cockpit of a fighter jet, as you do, says, "He did it! The son of a bitch did it!" And that's pretty much how I feel about David Leitch in The Fall Guy. That was a long wind up to get to that, but I thought it was worth it. I've mentioned before that I've been very mixed on David Leitch, but like, hot damn, this is how it's done. It's really like old school Hollywood movie making. The story is super fun, and there's really like enough chemistry from Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt to fuel a small country for a month. They are just like on fire in this film. So I really enjoyed it as well. I totally forgot this was written by Drew Pearce, who co-wrote Iron Man 3, which is one of, I think, the best MCU movies. And he also co-wrote Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. So as soon as I saw his name in the credits in the beginning of the movie, I was like, oh man, I feel like I'm in good hands here. So what did you think about the story of this movie, the screenplay?
Yeah, I mean it's a lot of fun. I do think that if you start to like pick apart and look at like the logistics of the story, there are things that are like, I'm not sure that's how that would play out. But it's the movie itself is so fun and moves so fast, and like it just everything works together so well that you don't really mind so much. And that's really what you want out of a movie, because like no story is going to be perfect. There's always going to be some little plot hole or decision that you kind of question. But like if you're not caring about it during the movie, and you don't think about much about it after you've enjoyed the movie, then that's the sign that you like have a really entertaining flick on there, because you don't want the audience thinking about those things.
Yeah, there were a few moments, especially near the end, which we'll talk about in a minute, where I kind of rolled my eyes a little bit because I felt like the movie was kind of getting a little bit too cute or kind of going off the rails a little bit. But those moments, like you said, were not enough to sort of wipe the gigantic smile off of my face that the rest of the film had given me. So anything else you wanted to mention before we get into, I guess, some more? It's not like this movie is really like spoilable in the sense that there are any big reveals or anything like that, but I do want to talk about some specifics. Anything else we should talk about before that, though?
No, let's just dig into it.
Okay, so spoiler alert for the rest of this conversation. I mean, as we mentioned, this is like an elite Ryan Gosling performance. He is just really in his bag right now. I mean, coming off of Barbie, it's like I can't think of a stronger back-to-back performance thing where somebody is just like absolutely owning the room in the best possible way, in recent memory anyway. I'm sure you can go back into movie history and find something, but like, what did you make of him as the leading man here?
I mean, Gosling is just on another level these days, like he's charming, he's handsome, he's hilarious, he's a great fucking actor, and like he's effortlessly cool in this opening scene. Like you really get a vibe that like he really has been a stuntman for a long time. He knows what he's doing, and like the flirtation between him and Emily Blunt, it's like just puts the charm on full blast right away. I also really like the opening sequence, the fact that like it's a really cool single take shot that cycles through this scene that they're working on a movie from the very beginning right up until the character has his accident.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's a great setup, and like it only gets funnier when Ryan Gosling is like down on his luck, and then trying to build back up from that with Emily Blunt as Jodie directing her own movie.
Yep.
So yeah, he's just fantastic all throughout.
Yeah, he plays flustered and sort of harried, I guess is the word, like so well. When he gets there's I can't remember exactly what the line is, but there's a moment where he's like on his knees on the dock where Aaron Taylor Johnson's character and his goons have him sort of tied up, and he's like he's just trying to interact with these guys in a way, and he's like, you can tell he's just like so frustrated, and frustrated Gosling is just so funny. He
Yeah.
really, it feels like, and Emily Blunt too, I mean, she's like an international treasure at this point. I feel like they both have really aged into being in absolute control of every aspect of their instruments as performers. They know how to settle into the right grooves in this movie and how to modulate just about every line reading for maximum effectiveness. You mentioned the supporting cast. Hannah Waddingham, she's pretty fun as the slimy producer. I kind of wish that character would have been a bit more fleshed out. What did you make of her?
Yeah, I mean, it's clear that like the character itself is kind of there more to serve like plot, than anything. But I do think that she made the most out of it. She is someone who's really hyped up on Diet Coke and energetic, and basically constantly selling themselves and the movie they're working on and whatever they're trying to get other people to do. Like that's exactly what a producer is supposed to do. So like, and I'm sure she's had plenty of experience with people like that. So yeah, even though it's not necessarily like the juiciest part, I think she had fun with it, and it worked well for the movie.
Yeah, I think the most generous read on it is maybe that this is a throwback to a different era of filmmaking, and a lot of times the villains of those previous eras weren't always super fleshed out either. I mean, that may be giving the movie a little bit too much credit, but Aaron Taylor Johnson, what'd you make of him? It seemed like he's really having a ball playing this obnoxious movie star character.
Yeah, it's funny because we actually have an article that talks about how it kind of leans into the idea that like there was a time when they really tried to make Aaron Taylor Johnson into exactly this kind of leading man, and it just feels like as handsome as he is and as ripped as he is, especially in this movie, he never really fit into that groove. Kind of similar to the way that like Colin Farrell never did. And but I feel like he does a good job of playing up that like it's because it's like a mix of like Matthew McConaughey and Tom Cruise and like several different leading men. So it's not meant to mirror one or the other specifically. In the beginning you might think it's Tom Cruise because his name is Tom Ryder and that kind of thing, but he's also not doing his own stunts and stuff like that. And then like he really shifts into Matthew McConaughey mode for the end of the movie. Otherwise he's honestly not in it much until like the end of the second act and third act, and that's really when like he gets to sink his teeth into the performance and have some fun. So I really liked him in it.
Yeah, and Winston Duke was great too. I liked that he's playing like this sort of standard rom-com best friend type of role. So he doesn't necessarily have a ton to do either, but he does have a little bit there in the middle where he and Gosling are hanging out and they go into Tom Ryder's place and have that big action scene. So he gets like some good action moments and like the idea of like him constantly quoting movie lines to Ryan Gosling, just like endearing stuff. Like this is what I want to see from Winston Duke. If he's not like leading movies of his own, I want to see him pop up in sort of fun supporting roles like this. So
Yeah, this made me want to see him like in more roles like this, and like actually having even if it's just supporting roles, like I would love for him to be a big lead and get bigger opportunities, but like having him be a character that is more akin to like himself in a way, and just being just a very regular person who is just having fun alongside the main character. Like that's like you said, that sequence when they're in Tom Ryder's apartment, and it's an action sequence. Their interaction when they're trying to pick their weapons and like actually fighting and stuff like that. Like I want to see him do more of that. So please, people, put Winston Duke in your movies.
yes, definitely. So I do have to bring up a couple of things that I thought about during the movie. First of all, there's no way that Jodie, a director of what appears to be this really massive film called Metal Storm, has that much free time to sort of like hang out and talk with Gosling's character and sing karaoke and like ask for multiple takes of cult Gosling's character Colt being set on fire just to like prove a point. Like she would be way too busy trying to keep her first feature film under control. That's one of those things that like I just clocked as I'm watching it, but it's not super bothersome. But kind of like the movie does have a kind of grounded, like respectful feel for what it feels like to be a crew member on the set of a film, and I just thought for the movie to take so many things and be like such a I guess like an accurate homage to so many aspects of movie making. The idea that Jodie, a former camera operator, is now being thrust into this gigantic like blockbuster movie sphere where her movies premiering footage at Hall H and like all of that kind of stuff. It just kind of was like, oh, okay, well, this is clearly like for plot reasons instead of like the realism part of stuff. So
I don't know. I mean, when you think about it, though, like that's kind of what happened, with not necessarily a jump from like a camera operator to that thing, but like there's plenty of filmmakers who, they have successful runs in indie movies and then suddenly get blockbusters. You look at somebody like Mark Webb, who jumped from 500 Days of Summer to The Amazing Spider-Man.
yeah,
Um,
I guess like that's the there is like some history of that kind of thing that feels like an era that was a long time ago. Like it's well, I don't know. I was gonna say that, but then I'm just remembering that like Lee Isaac Chung from Minari is directing Twisters, so I guess it's still happening to some degree.
Yeah, there's definitely still like indie directors and like people who like so many. There's a lot of Marvel projects that have done it too. Yeah, I feel like having someone like Chloe Zhao on Eternals was like a big thing as
Yeah,
well. So
yeah, but just like the amount of free time that she had, and also
oh
like
yeah, true that. Yeah, that's all that stuff is 100% accurate. Like for a movie that apparently is seemingly like could be in trouble and like they're worried about the budget and like the studio shutting it down, like spending all that time setting Gosling on fire over and over again. It's like I'm not sure if Jodie's a great director.
and then like the final confrontation when they're trying to get the confession out of Ryder, and Jodie basically teams up with Colt and Dan, Winston Duke's stunt coordinator character, to organize this elaborate series of stunts that result in bad guys' cars being flipped over and all of that is just like patently ridiculous. Like this movie is supposed to be this love letter to the stunt community, but real stunt people are all about safety, so they would never do that to like non-stunt cars. But again, like
But
at
they're
that
trying to
point,
catch bad guys,
I know, I
Ben.
was
I
just
mean,
getting
like...
ready to say it really like at that point becomes like good guys versus bad guys in like the broadest possible sense. So you kind of forgive it because like everything is the movie is so fun. Like there's such a light sort of zippy quality to everything that I don't really hold these as like legitimate grievances against the movie or anything. There's stuff that crossed my mind that I wanted to mention. So, okay, Brad, this is the question that I've had on my mind. I hope it's a somewhat provocative question. I think we can both agree that the action in this movie is well executed. It's staged well. I thought the geography of the scenes was pretty clear the whole time. I was never really taken out of the movie by any sort of like CG enhancements that needed to happen. So the question is, even though the action in the movie is well done, is it memorable? Are there any action scenes or moments that we're going to be talking about in 5 years, the same way that we're going to be talking about the stairs scene in John Wick Chapter 4, for example?
You can't just like throw like a tall order like that out there. I If there's one sequence I think that probably is the most memorable, it's the dumpster fight. That is also a car chase. I think that was particularly impressive, especially when you see in the stunt reel in the credits that like they did a lot of that practically, where they actually had a vehicle driving and a dumpster spinning and Gosling and a stuntman inside of it, that kind of thing. That
Mm.
was particularly cool. There's obviously certain parts of it that are digital when they're like driving across a big bridge and like he's on a door and stuff like that, because you can't easily do that practically. But yeah, if there was one particular sequence, I feel like it's that entire chase, and then that specific part of the chase was pretty cool, especially when the dog gets involved. That was amazing.
Yeah. Oh man, great movie dog. We didn't mention that yet, but yeah, awesome stuff from that dog. Yeah, I just kind of felt myself like enjoying the action in the moment. And there's an awful lot of like explosions and car flips and stuff like that in this movie. But afterwards, I was kind of like, I don't really think there was anything for me that necessarily rose to the level of like, oh my god, this is the standout, like the one single standout action moment from this movie. I thought it was like a really well done and sort of effective letter to love letter to the stunt folks, especially like the end credits showcasing the footage of all the people doing the dirty work and stuff like you said. But yeah, I don't know. There was something about I guess I was expecting maybe something a little bit more inventive or something, but you know, it's just like fine all the way through. I thought so. I don't really know if you have
I do
anything to add
think
to that.
I think that um maybe just like rewatching the movie more, I think I might appreciate more because as I'm thinking about it, there are some cool things about the sequence that happens in Tom Ryder's apartment, mainly focusing on the fact that they have to use fake weapons to fight guys with real guns and stuff like that. So like the way Gosling is using like the fake gun as a deterrent, and the way Winston Duke is using, you know, the rubber hatchet, you know,
Hmm.
as a weapon. There's some inventive stuff there. You know, it's not like something that's mind blowing necessarily, but I feel like that the way that they approach stuff that feels like normal for action movies, like just fight sequences, they do small, you know, innovative things without necessarily doing something that like feels like it's groundbreaking in a major way, you know. So
Yeah,
I think that's one of the things I appreciate about David Leitch as an action director the most, is that he makes what would otherwise be quote unquote simple fight sequences a little more exciting by doing something, you know, that actually is different from the norm.
yeah, and I did like. I mean, I'm thinking of all of the big action set pieces now, trying to go back over them in my head, and I think the maybe the one thing that stood out to me is the helicopter drop at the end. It seems like they really set up that gigantic pad and had a guy fall, you know, from that
Yeah, for
height
sure.
or whatever. So like that's something you don't really see too often these days. That used to be like a standard kind of move in old Hollywood stuff, but it's been a while because they typically have, you know, wires and stuff like that. And this felt like a real, and I don't know, who knows, maybe the guy was wired up, but I'm sure there's going to be like a ton of like behind the scenes featurettes and stuff like that highlighting the stunts for this movie when it comes to home video. But that
Yeah.
seemed to me like a moment where they actually went out of their way to do like a true homage to the way that things used to be done, and so that I don't know, it's kind of it feels a little goofy because like it's preceded immediately by Ryan Gosling like flipping the double birds at the guys as he like falls backwards out, and then it goes to the wide shot of the stuntman actually falling out of the sky. So I don't know, maybe I was it doesn't necessarily have like the narrative heft or like the uh yeah
It's it's a great moment though.
it is I
Oh,
was
the you know what, the club fight sequence was actually also pretty cool. The way they shot that, where it was like partially slow motion and like it was all black lighting, so
oh
there
yeah.
were neon colors, and then like since he was on drugs, they had little like slightly animated flourishes that made it seem like he was tripping out while he was also fighting. That was a pretty cool sequence too.
Yeah, yeah, I enjoyed that. I'm not trying to like badmouth this movie because I really had a fun time
Why
with
do
it. I
you
was just
hate the
trying.
Fall Guy, Ben?
I was just yeah wondering if anything rose to like the truly memorable levels of like we're going to be talking about this years from now kind of thing. So, all right, well I appreciate you you putting me in my place there, Brad. All right, let's take a break and then we'll come back and present a few of these interviews. All right. So Ryan Scott, I think this was during South by Southwest, had the opportunity to speak with a handful of folks who worked on this movie. So the first one here, the downside is he's only able to talk to them for like 3 or 4 minutes each or something. And typically we don't really do interviews like this on Slash Film, but I think Ryan and Jacob had both seen the movie already and they were both so high on it that it was one of the exceptions of like, all right, well, if we get to talk to these folks, even in a limited capacity, so be it, because this movie is so fun. So his first conversation was with Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt. Here's that conversation.
Hi,
Hey
Ryan.
Ryan.
So first off, again, thank you. I was at the South by Southwest premiere. It was amazing. It was one of the more energetic premieres I've ever been to.
Mm.
But you guys are both coming off of the biggest movies of your respective careers. So how does it feel rolling from, you know, Barbie and Oppenheimer into this, which is very different in both respects from what you guys are coming off of?
Well, those were just really a marketing ploy for this. We only did those films so that we could do this, which is the real Barbenheimer, which was
worked.
actually the working title of Fall Guy, which
That's
a lot of
right.
people don't
That's
realize.
right. People don't realize that, but this is really it's. We've been sleuthy about it. We're calling
Yeah.
it Fall Guy, but it's actually Barbenheimer, guys.
Good marketing tool.
Yeah.
So Ryan, one of the things I really liked at the premiere is you talked, you know, this is a movie you play a stuntman, of course, but and a lot of actors are always out there declaring, "Oh, I did my own stunts, I do my own stunts," but you were very clear, like, no, these stuntmen in this movie are the men that make this movie. So, How important was it for you taking on this movie to make sure those guys get their due?
I mean, it's really an honor to be a part of a film that sort of shines a light on the stunt community and also the crew. You know, I've had the first thing I ever did really was an action kids TV show, and so I've had a stunt double my whole life. And you know, there's just always been this strange dynamic where they kind of come in and they do all the cool stuff and they risk everything and then they leave and then everyone sort of pretends like they weren't there, or the audience is never supposed to. The better they are in a way, the more you know they're not there.
Yeah.
And it just feels so wrong because what they've done is so, you know, and sometimes they create the most memorable sequences in the whole film.
I mean, and so many films that we grew up watching, some of the most memorable scenes from those films, whether it's Indiana Jones doing the drag behind the train, or I watched Fugitive recently, the jump off the waterfall,
Yeah.
like stuff like that. It's like they're usually big stunt action moments that are so lasting for people and have changed people's lives, you know. And I think for so long, these stunt performers have been hiding in the shadows, and I'm not sure why that is, because we're in a world where we're usually stripped of the mystique of that anyway. We've got to celebrate their colossal contribution to making movies. And they literally risk life and limb to give people that crackling sense of wonder when they're watching a film. And so it's beautiful for us to be a part of the love letter to them.
Brian, if I could change the topic just for a second,
Brian?
there is a
It actually is Brian.
there is the Wolfman movie coming out for Blumhouse. Now, my understanding is you were going to star in that, but now you're just producing it. So what happened with that? Why did you end up stepping away?
This is the more interesting story.
Why are you trying to sync my Wolfman
this
with
is
your
a very
Wolfman?
sensitive. So I wish you hadn't.
Guys, my Wolfman was the Wolfman, okay? I don't know why you're trying to come in and rain on my Wolfman parade.
Next question, please.
Move on.
Please, Ryan.
Move on.
Please.
Well, it looks like they're actually kicking me out of here, but thank you guys so
Okay.
much for your time. I love the movie, and congratulations, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
And then next up, he spoke with Winston Duke and Stephanie Hsu. And actually, before we get into this, Brad, we didn't really talk about Stephanie Hsu in this movie. She has a pretty small role, but what did you make of her as like the sort of as the ambitious assistant type of character?
You know, this was the role where I was a little, I guess, disappointed that they didn't have something more for her. And you know, maybe when you're in this position as an actor, you don't turn down the opportunity to work with a director like David Leitch in a movie with a cast like Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt. She didn't have a ton to do. She was fine in the role. Like she's not bad by any means, but like the character just doesn't really have a lot to do other than move the plot forward. So that was a little disappointing because I would like to see more from her, especially considering how great she was in Everything Everywhere All at Once. So I would say that slightly disappointed, but it's not her fault, and it's just kind of just the way the movie is.
Yeah. Okay, so here is the conversation with Winston Duke and Stephanie Hsu.
Ryan Scott, how you doing?
I'm so happy to be talking to you guys. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Absolutely, man.
So Stephanie, I'd like to start with you. I live in Austin and I go to South by Southwest regularly. You've had quite the run. You had Everything Everywhere All at Once. That rolled into Joyride, and then that rolled into this. So what was it like showing up this year with like your third like incredibly well-received movie in a row?
Yeah, it's really wild actually, because before Everything Everywhere, I had never been to Austin in my life, and now I go there every year. But South by truly is one of my favorite film festivals, and like the audiences are amazing, and honestly, I just get so excited every single time to get to share something there because I know it's going to be so raucous, so much love.
100%.
People just are not pretentious. They just love movies and they're rooting for whatever they're going to see. And so that's like the best way to ever get to share something for the first time. And also then Austin tacos, amazing.
Yeah.
It's like, wow,
It's a town that really supports the arts, and you can feel it. You can tell, you know, even just finding the ability to find music in so many places, the amazing opportunity to find so many different performing arts. It's one of those places that's a really supportive community, and whenever you premiere anything there, you feel it, and it's a really great barometer, you know, for kind of how things are gonna go, because it's a city filled with great regular people who are honest.
So this is a very like practically filmed, there was a lot of emphasis like it's a love letter to the stunt performers of the world. And Winston, you are no stranger to stunt, but so how did filming this like from a stunt perspective compare to your work on say like Black Panther or Avengers?
Well, this movie was about stunts and it's very meta. It's like a film inside a film. So we really got to lean into what actually makes stunts so successful. And outside of it really just being about making the take and making the day, it's about getting everyone home safe, which means that it has to be really well calculated. Everything's very well measured. There's a lot of science and mathematics included in everything the stunt teams do. So it's a lot more cerebral than people realize. And that was something that I didn't always get to see, because in other movies, it's like, get this part down so that we could do this other part. And I'm like, I'm in my story, right? So I'm in my story and I'm getting lost in my story. And I'm like, cool, how's this gonna go? But this story is about making the story. So it was all folded in and I really enjoyed that. And I have a newfound added respect for the stunt community.
So they're kicking me out of here real quick, but Winston, I did have one more quick question. I thought you were incredible as Batman on that podcast.
Oh, thanks, man.
James Gunn is looking for a new Batman for that Brave and the Bold movie. Would you have any thought of doing that in live action?
Listen, man, can you start that? I would say I challenge you to get on all these socials and push for me. Get your community. I would love to. I would love to, do that as Batman. I'd love, any opportunity to explore new characters, to change narratives around some of, what's some of these entrenched ideas of how these characters are supposed to look, sound, and perform. I'm all for it.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. I genuinely love the movie. So congrats on that. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
And then finally, he had a few minutes to talk with director and producer David Leitch.
Ryan, how are you?
Oh my God, I'm so good, man. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today.
Of course. Exciting.
I was at the South by screening. And, yeah, I've been to a lot over the years, man. That was one of the more... People were into it, man. It was really fun.
It was a rowdy crowd. I loved it.
It was. Look, you're no stranger to like big, budget franchise films at this point, but does this one feel a little bit more personal to you, given that you have a background as a stuntman in this business?
Yeah, it was a lot more personal. I think there was an ability to, obviously, all the anecdotes I had from 25 years plus of being a stunt performer and living my entire adult life on movie sets, I got to sort of channel into this movie. And I think that's why it's a love letter, not only to stunts, but also to, the crew that, make the movie happen. And it was fun to actually be able to talk from a point of experience to both of my leading actors. Like one is portraying a stuntman, and I have obviously depth and knowledge of that personal experience. And then one's playing a director, and now, I've been doing that for a decade. Can speak from experience as well. And so it's really personal that way.
So, look, there were no shortage of I don't want to spoil anything for audiences, but there is some crazy action sequences, great stunt work in this movie. Were there any sequences or stunts that you had to abandon either for budgetary reasons or you just couldn't figure out a way to pull them off?
There there wasn't. The studio was really supportive that we would approach this from a very practical stunt point of view. It was our mandate. Kelly and I wanted to make sure if we're going to tell the story about a stuntman, we wanted to make sure the stunts were authentic. And so we dove into those old school classic stunts that we had to do practically. Now, that being said, our visual effects team did incredible work when it had to. But there's, 99% of the stuff we're doing is practical in-camera stunts that, again, like we set a world record for the number of cannon rolls, Logan, Holiday. We just delivered next level practical action that you don't see that much anymore.
Totally. So, look, this is a franchise already. You're obviously adapting a TV show here. But has there been any like discussion of like, hey, how, I know the movie hasn't even come out yet, but has the studio been like, so do you have any thoughts on doing another one here? Like, or have you guys talked at all about maybe, what a follow-up would look like?
I think all of us, loved the world so much and really had an incredible time making the movie. I think you can see the joy we're having as filmmakers. Ryan, Emily, Kelly, myself, like collaborating in this way that, yeah, our fingers and toes are crossed. Like we could spend more time in this world with Jodie and Colt. That would be amazing. But I don't want to jinx anything. I want people to come out and see it.
Oh, totally. So they're about to kick me out of here, but on the sequel train, I do have to ask you real quick. At this point, you've got a couple of things that may or may not get sequels at some point. What is more likely, my friend, Hobbs and Shaw 2 or Atomic Blonde 2?
Wow. I think they both have a really good shot. And by the way, I would love to go back to both those worlds, really fun, great characters, and cool collaborations with some great actors. So probably equal. I couldn't tell you which has a better shot. I know we're talking about both.
Awesome. Well, David, seriously, thank you so much for your time, man. I appreciate it. And congratulations on the film, man. I really genuinely enjoyed it.
Thank you.
All right. So, Brad, I don't know if you've read the article or actually heard that audio yet. We're sort of doing this a little bit out of order as we record this today. But there was a moment where Ryan asked David Leitch about a potential sequel, and he doesn't come out right out and say, yes, we're developing one, but he says, we're kind of keeping our options open. We hope this first movie does well, but we want to come, we would be interested in coming back, kind of thing. So one of the things that Jacob, when he wrote his review of The Fall Guy from South by Southwest, was praising so much about this movie is that it feels like a complete experience. It does not necessarily feel like the sort of sweaty, desperate start of a franchise that so many movies feel like coming out of modern Hollywood. So I guess my question for you is, would you want to see a sequel to The Fall Guy, or do you prefer it to be, this sort of like one-off jewel that it is?
Gosh, I'm fine either way. I would be curious as to what they would do with a sequel, only because the movie does not have the same framework that the TV show did, because the TV show was about a stunt guy who worked as a bounty hunter and utilized his stunt skills to help him in tracking down bad guys. So that gave you something where you could easily continue the story and have like a new job for him to do. But Ryan Gosling's stuntman character doesn't become like a full-on bounty hunter. He's just kind of like accidentally gets involved in this plot of intrigue and murder and mystery while trying to save the movie of his ex-girlfriend, and ends up getting framed, for murder and whatnot. So I don't know how you do something like that again without it feeling like, oh, really? Like he's in another situation where he has to work his way out of it, like that.
Yeah, like Die Hard syndrome.
Yeah, exactly. But like at the same time, like some of the best sequels have come from like sequelizing a movie that was perfectly fine on its own and didn't go out of its way to set up a sequel, didn't need a sequel. So yeah, I mean, if there's a way they can do it and it doesn't feel stupid, I would absolutely love to see all these people back together again to see what they can do. But like at the same time, I feel like it would be fine if David Leitch just went off and did, something else, a new movie like The Fall Guy, just did something completely different.
Yeah, whatever the case, I hope that Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt continue to work together, because for me, like, they were so electric on screen together. And Gosling has this with a lot of people. I mean, him and Rachel McAdams back in the day, it felt like those two could have really made a bunch of movies together. Him and Emma Stone, they actually have made a handful of movies together. But I just he has such chemistry with these leading ladies that I just want Hollywood to capitalize on that. And if we're going to be living in this society where Hollywood is so like risk averse and like, I don't know about this, I don't know about casting these people, whatever, like lean into what works and what audiences love, which is Ryan Gosling, like being charming as hell with insert leading lady here. So I really hope that like they capitalize on this momentum. And I mean, even from like the little bit that they had at the Oscars, like that was great. Their little banter back and forth, So I just really hope these two get to team up again.
I had a thought while watching this, and it's not something that like I'm 100% behind, because there's probably a better person you get to fit this kind of like archetype for a character, but like, and because this movie kind of veers towards doing what this would do somewhat, but I thought for a moment that I would love to see Ryan Gosling in a remake of Last Action Hero directed by David Leitch.
Huh, that's fascinating.
But I don't know if you can effectively call it Last Action Hero, because Ryan Gosling isn't necessarily like a full on action star. So maybe you could like switch it up and call it like, the Last Movie Star or something like that, and then you could use it to tie into like not only to just star in action movies, but like you could do things where like you reference La La Land, you reference the Notebook, you reference First Man, and all that stuff, and like have a similar meta cinematic universe kind of thing.
I mean, that's a really fun idea, Brad, especially, and I think Gosling would be perfect for that because he's made so many different types of movies over his career. I mean, even going back to like Murder by Numbers and like, Remember the Titans, like he has so many different styles of thing that he's done over the years that are like easily visually identifiable. You can drop him back into the world of Drive for like a parody situation like that. People would instantly understand what you're talking about with that. So, there are not that many actors, I think, where you could do that and have them have that sort of authentic, like I've actually been here before feeling to it across such a wide variety of genres. And Gosling would be a perfect fit for that. So there you go, Hollywood. Yet another free idea coming to you from Slash Film Daily. So, okay, well, I think that's going to do it for today's episode of the show. You can find much more of the stories that I mentioned on the show at slashfilm.com. I will link to a couple things in the show notes as well. Slash Film Daily is published every weekday, bringing you the most exciting news from the world of movies and TV, as well as deeper dives into the great features you can find on the site. You can subscribe to the show on Apple, Overcast, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Send your feedback, questions, comments, concerns, and mailbag topics to us at bpearson@slashfilm.com. Make sure to leave your name and general geographic location in case we mention your email on the air. Don't forget to take a minute to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. That really does help us out a lot. Tell your friends about the show any way you can. Thank you so much for listening, and